Guess who we're talking about today? When Pokemon Black and White first came out, we were introduced to some of the best Pokemon designs in ever time. But also, at the same time, easily some of the worst. And to many people, especially the vocal ones, Sawk and Throh were some of those terrible ones. Like, what is this Bert and Ernie garbage in my Pokemon game? I thought it couldn't get any worse after those 4th gen monstrosities. But maybe there is something more to these Muppets, or monstrosities, or Arlo, no. Pokemon. Right. Perhaps there can be a redeeming factor hidden somewhere in their design, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So I guess I'm sort of defending Sawk and Throh a little bit, talking about some interesting origins that they have. So I guess that way we can understand all that, and then we can go back to trashing them. So, in my Gen 5 Shiny Pokemon Explained video, I said Sawk and Throh don't really have much of a reason for their shiny colors, because they also don't really have much of a reason for their regular colors either. But it turns out, I was wrong! It's not the first time that's happened, and it for sure won't be the last. A friend of mine pointed out the reason they are these colors, and in hindsight, it really should have been obvious. I'm just dumb, I guess. But before we get into that specifically, let's first go all the way back to their conception. As in the designer's conception of them. You know, if they don't want Pokemon taking off their clothes, they probably shouldn't give them clothes. So, just looking at them, it's kinda hard to tell, but according to multiple interviews about the development of Pokemon Black and White, we learn that Sawk and Throh are based on Oni. In fact, their beta designs even had Oni horns, which, of course, makes them look more like an Oni. I mean, duh. I guess they removed the horns to keep them from looking too demonic. Pokemon was already accused of being satanic back during Gen 1 and 2, so they likely wanted to avoid adding to that whole scenario. But anyway, Oni come in many colors. The most common ones, though, are, of course, red and blue. In fact, there's a whole story about the red and blue Oni. Here it is in short. Back in the day, 2 Oni lived together in the woods. The red Oni watched the humans in the village and wanted to join them, but couldn't, because they would kill him, because he's an Oni. Blue Oni was content with his life and didn't care about the village, but he saw his good friend, Red Oni, get very sad. So Blue Oni planned something with his friend. Blue Oni ran up to the town, pretending he was attacking them, and then Red Oni came in, pretending to beat up the monster and save the village. Blue Oni's plan worked, and Red Oni was accepted as a hero, and he lived with them from then on. But Blue Oni got sad that he can't see his friend again, but he watches the village from a distance, happy that his good friend is happy. Oh, now there's a cute story. Maybe the Sesame Street references make sense now. I mean, Sesame Street is in New York after all, the place Unova's based on, the first region we saw that, but no. So here's a question. Is there a reason why 2 Onis are in the US? Like, Onis are super Japanese. Well, it turns out, doing a little bit of digging, that also makes perfect sense. To learn the reasoning, though, we have to go back to World War II. World War II is just like such a pivotal turning point in world history, right? So as you may know, during World War II, Japan and the United States weren't exactly the best of friends, but before that, both sides were popping out propaganda at each other like it was going out of style. And you've likely seen plenty of the American propaganda, what with Disney and Looney Tunes getting involved in its creation.
I'm a little crazy too.
But of course, Japan had their own propaganda, with their own means of storytelling, and a lot of it focused around the Japanese folktale of Momotaro, a story about a boy who popped out of a peach and grew up to be quite the warrior, and went on a quest to travel to an island covered in big, strong, greedy Onis. And on the way, he befriended a dog, a monkey, and a pheasant, and none of them really got along with each other, but eventually, they did. They got over their differences, and they took over the Oni Island and saved all of the slaves and took all of the riches. Now, before World War II, it actually wasn't all that super popular of a folktale, but then during World War II, it was used as the ideal situation for Japan. Momotaro is an underdog, just as Japan was in the grand scheme of things, going against the superpower that were the Allies. Plus, the United States was overseas, just like the Onis on the distant island, and thus, Onis were often used as symbols representing the United States and the United Kingdom because they were big, scary, and powerful. But hey, dear Japanese citizens, if we put aside our petty squabbles with each other and work together, we can take them on and take their riches and free the Asians they have in concentration camps. So, the story of Momotaro is very fitting, sort of representing the ideal scenario for them, and thus, at the same time, red and blue ogres came to represent the United States. Well fitting due to the whole red, white, and blue thing. Sawk and Throh each wear a white gi, so they are red, white, and blue after all. But there is still one question to all of this. Why the martial arts? Is it just because Onis are inherently Japanese or more broadly Eastern, so Eastern martial arts make sense? Well, maybe, but it could also have to do with how popular karate and judo are over here, those being the two martial arts that they use. But seriously, Google your city and karate or judo dojo, and chances are at least one dojo shows up, maybe dozens. There are so many that it's become a stereotype in movies and TV shows in the US that at least one kid in the big family has a karate uniform and has a ceremony or practice to get to. Some American schools even integrate karate lessons into their PE classes. Mine did, and I hated it. Also, one of the most popular sports movies is Karate Kid. The movie is so big you probably know some of the quotes in it without even seeing the movie, like wax on and wax off. Also, I've never been attacked by a tree. It's true. But why are these things so popular here? Well, first let's talk about judo. Judo first planted its seeds in the United States in 1879 when the president at the time, Ulysses S. Grant, aka the absolute mad lad that put the Confederacy in its place while leading the Union Army, saw a judo match in Japan and took an interest in it. Simple as that. Afterwards, in 1919, John Dewey began to give lectures on the philosophy of the sport. Some other people towed the line in keeping it popular in the US, but then came in the total Chad, Teddy Roosevelt. When good old Teddy was getting a bit too old for boxing, a friend of his told him about judo, and he literally picked it up then and there and started learning it. So yeah, the fact that multiple US presidents took an interest in judo may be playing a role in throw being perfectly fitting for Unova. So next is Sawk, with karate. US karate gets its start in Hawaii, but it gained popularity on the mainland all thanks to Ed Parker. This guy wasn't the first to open a karate dojo in America at all, but he opened a ton of them all across the country and simplified the way that karate is taught so that it can be learned by many more people, especially Americans, who need things to put as simply as they can. But he turned karate from a small thing to the juggernaut that it is today, and the sport was even eventually picked up by Elvis, the king of rock himself. And all of this is why karate dojos are everywhere, and why karate is a household name for many Americans. So ultimately, Sawk and Throh are amalgamations of Japanese and American culture. While they may not be as obviously Onis as they once were, since Game Freak probably thought to tone that down a bit to kind of avoid making a reference to the propaganda, as they obviously still bear some resemblance to America with their colors and the whole thing. I mean, it was only 70 years ago, 75-ish. So yeah, it's cool. And now you also know that if Elvis and Teddy Roosevelt had a Pokemon team, they would have these ugly, ugly disgraces of Pokemon on their teams. Look, you can totally get the intent behind a design and still think it's a bad design. This is the perfect example. So,